reading an article, the finance has been about the what, right? And now the question is, what now? You've got that data. And like you say, AI can do all of that, analytics and probably the reporting as well, and all of the basic stuff. And I think, finance now has to be taking that analysis.
Thank you for listening to the podcast thus far. The one favor I would ask, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, is to press the follow and subscribe button on whatever media platform you listen to us, as it helps us grow our network and grow the podcast. So thank you and enjoy the podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Alchemy Uncensored. We're on our third season and we promise you that we'll bring in more valuable insights into the financial and tax sector of the UAE. Today, we've got Gop Menon. Gop is currently CFO for India, Middle East and Africa at Informa, the global trade events and exhibitions organizer. Prior to joining Informa in 2023, Gop held progressively senior roles at PwC, Thomson Reuters and Clyde & Co. His career has spanned a wide spectrum of finance roles across multiple industries and diverse geographies, and sees his strengths as being commercial, strategic, collaborative and above all, a people person. Gop is passionate about giving back, and currently also serves as a board advisor to the education startup Z-Notes and sits on the board of governors at Sharjah English School. So Gop, welcome. How are you this morning?
Morning, Conor. I'm good, thank you.
You made it here.
I did, yes, despite the Dubai traffic.
Yeah, I think we're obviously recording this during the summer, so the traffic is thankfully not as bad as it has been.
Shouldn't be.
But look, Gop, I've been fortunate to knowing you for quite a few years at this stage, seen your journey firsthand from the different roles you've been in. And obviously I've given you a bit of a high-level overview of you and your background, but we'll never do it justice. So if you can just maybe introduce yourself to our listeners, a bit about your background personally and professionally, and we'll go from there.
If I go back to my childhood, grew up as an expat child. So my father worked for Shell, lived across 3 or 4 continents, moving on the move every 4 or 5 years. Born in the Netherlands, lived for a while in Venezuela, in South America, in Brunei, Southeast Asia. In Holland for a bit of my adolescence, in Qatar, and then the UK for university. So
it's well travelled.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, like I say, sort of colour my character a little bit in terms of I do like to think of myself as quite multicultural as a result of that. After university, having met my now wife at university, I decided to stay in the UK and forge my career there. So I joined PwC, did my chartered accountants training with them, spent 5 years with them, and then moved on to Reuters, now Thomson Reuters, and just did sort of a bunch of different finance roles there, group, divisional, regional, etc. And Reuters is what brought me to Dubai 18 years ago now.
Yeah.
For what was supposed to be a secondment in the typical Dubai story.
Dubai was very different back then,
yes.
18 years ago.
Yeah, the typical Dubai story came for a 4-year secondment and never left, basically.
Still here.
Yeah.
In your introduction, and this is a point which for senior finance professionals is probably the most annoying part of UAE, especially when you're going for roles, is actually having the industry experience.
Mm-hmm.
And, you are a prime example of someone who has actually navigated through different industries, because it's the biggest challenge we find out here. And I'm sure you've been at the receiving end of it sometimes as well, where, you interview for a job and you're just told, even after the interview, oh, you haven't got the right industry experience, even though they knew this from the outset. So how have you went about, just for our listeners, because people are trying to come into the region, and just to understand the nuances that, you've probably experienced firsthand, the pros and cons.
It's a big bugbear of mine. And as you say, I've switched from media data industry to the legal industry and now to the sort of trade events exhibitions industry, all in Dubai. And yes, you're right. I think we have spoken about it before, that I did find it quite frustrating when I left Thomson Reuters initially, when I left Clyde & Co. to make that breakthrough. I think here in this region in particular, you are sort of like boxed in.
Pigeonholed.
Pigeonholed, right? To say, okay, you are this, it's professional services, or it's media, or whatever it is.
Because the big issue, again, I see, and I'm only looking this, of course, in the middle, is that sometimes companies, they go for someone just because they tick a box, when the other candidate is maybe a better leader, maybe has better skill set, emotional intelligence, and that can be the problem where, they're so fixated on the industry experience.
Absolutely. And I think, there's maybe one or two industries, maybe oil and gas and things where, yes, industry experience counts for a lot.
Yeah, I think it'd be challenging going from legal sector to oil and gas.
Absolutely. But look, you come from a finance qualified background as well. And like a lot of my peers do, the skills we have are transferable. You can move into anything. Yes, you do need to learn that industry or learn that company, but that's something you can scale quite quickly. I think the key fact is that you have got those transferable skills.
Yeah, because the biggest thing, again, from having many of these sort of conversations is that the key things which I keep hearing from speaking to senior finance leaders is obviously leadership skills. And what is that? It's being able to motivate a team. It's being able to, business partnering, I think, is so important, especially in certain industries where you need to get on with the sales guys, the IT guys, and that's nothing to do with industry experience. That's more about the actual person themselves. So,
absolutely.
These are the things which having more of these conversations, and I just think companies should be more open, because I'm sure with your background going into the industry you've went, and you're coming in with a different set of eyes and different views, which I guess challenges things as well, because that's probably the biggest issue I see sometimes with the finance functions here, is that some of the team members aren't willing to challenge. That's the feedback we get, where they have a candidate or someone in the position, and they're doing a good job, but they're not challenging the wider function.
Exactly. I completely agree. And I think you just touched on it there. I think bringing the fresh ideas, etc. Example I'd give is going into Clyde & Co. So having spent several years in media and data, the group CFO at Clyde & Co. based out of London, he was very keen on bringing fresh thinking. I think the legal industry is notorious, even in support functions, for sort of recruiting from within the industry. So he himself came from a sort of insurance background, and he was very keen on the regional CFOs being from a non-legal background. So I remember our North America CFO came from a manufacturing background. The guy covering Asia came from a banking background, and obviously I came from a data media background. And I think when we got together as a finance leadership team, it was quite noticeable that we came with different ideas. And okay, why don't we did this back at previous industry. Why don't we try this, or is this a way of doing it? Some of it won't work because of the industry, but I think that sort of shakes things up a little bit, and just a different way of looking at things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's just the biggest thing the region hiring companies should learn from, because obviously in UAE in particular, there is a massive oversupply of candidates. We all know that across all levels, that there's definitely more candidates than jobs. But, I do think it's a refreshing way to look at things. So I guess what we want to move on to now is, as you've mentioned in the intro, is, mentoring. I'd always view you as one of the good guys, so, you take everything, you're a great listener. So quite keen to get your views on, mentoring, coaching, and how it's impacted your life. And I think more importantly for our listeners, up and coming talent, how do they go about getting a mentor, and, how the values, you've seen from doing it yourself and also giving it to mentees.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of the areas that I'm very, very passionate about. And I keep telling anyone who will listen, you can't have enough mentors. And, I've been lucky in that some of the companies I've worked with have had sort of formal programs running. Most recently within Informa, we ran a sort of a 6-month reverse mentoring program, actually, which was fantastic. So it was junior members of staff mentoring more senior members,
really,
which was an eye-opener for me. I had done it previously, but this was some of the questions being asked by...
And you know who you're...
No,
okay, no, it was anonymous.
No, it wasn't anonymous, but it was... I didn't know the person before we started the relationship, basically. But, sort of being mentored by someone in a degree who's quite opposite to me, a 20-something female working in communications. So, completely different to me. But one of the questions she was asking me, really forced me to think and reevaluate. And I do think that's what the sort of the mentoring is about. And it doesn't matter. I mean, you probably have mentors now without even realizing it, right? It doesn't need to be a formal program, like I say. Your parents are mentors, effectively. Yeah. And in a work scenario, yes, in a way, your line manager, your boss is mentor of kind, but it's getting all those sort of different experiences. And what I try and encourage people, I'm quite keen to mentor. I like to try and do it outside of my own team at work. I'm quite keen to say to everyone, find mentors from sort of all walks of life, all career paths, all ages, all different. So you get different perspectives to then shape your own career path.
And just, for our listeners that have never had a mentor, if you were mentoring me now, what sort of, how do you open up the conversation? Like what sort of, ways do you go about it? Is it sort of getting the feel for the person's motivations, their pain points, or is it just more of an open chat and seeing what?
Well, I'm currently mentoring someone who is actually within Informa, a finance guy, but very early on in his career. So our sessions, once a month, I always say to him, come to me with something you want to talk about, a particular issue that you're grappling with, whether it's a relationship issue, whether it's a technical issue. Then we just start talking about it. Quite often, I will, a bit long in the tooth now, but I can draw on similar experiences or such. Actually, a very recent mentoring conversation, and this touches on something we were talking about earlier. He asked me a particular, specific relationship issue that he was encountering, and said, have I been through anything like that? And initially, I was sort of like, no, I don't think so. But here are similar situations and sort of adapting them to the situation. And as we were talking, then it suddenly dawned on me, actually, no, I've been in a very, very similar situation to him, 10, 15 years ago. And I could draw on it. But the point is, earlier we were talking about, the transferable skills and things. And I think this is part and parcel of mentoring. I would say everyone comes with a certain skill set, even if they're early on in their career, they've got skill sets that they've learned at school, university, and so on. And those skills, what you're looking for is the angle to say, how do I adapt these to this current situation or to this current job that I'm looking for, this company or industry that I want to go for? There is always an angle. You just need to, I think, think strongly about it. And going back to that earlier point, I think it's breaking the mold of switching industries is about convincing the people recruiting you that you have got a skill set that is adaptable, and giving them examples potentially of how you can do that.
And then on the mentoring, the flip side of that, then when you were up and coming, did you have many mentors professionally or was it personally? Or?
I had one or two, and that's one of the things I look back on with a bit of regret. I feel I probably should have had more mentors, and maybe sort of potentially, directed my career in a different way, sort of thing. But and that's where I say now to everyone, have as many mentors. Some are.
Because someone can open doors for you. I imagine
exactly.
Like maybe the elephant in the room is that for listeners that if you get a good mentor, of course they're going to be your cheerleader and recommend you. Because the reality is, especially for the up and coming guys, is that it is all about recommendations. How do you get yourself noticed in the market? And of course, if there's a mentor or someone very credible, if they speak to a recruiter or speak to a hiring manager, they're going to pay a lot more notice as opposed to just a CV ending up in their inbox.
Absolutely, yeah. Couldn't agree more. I think, you never know where those connections can lead you to. Yeah, and but also I think those conversations can open your eyes. Basically, somebody can just say one innocuous comment, which just basically suddenly think, oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah. Point which I really like going into in UAE, and as I said, you're a very well traveled man between South America, Asia, Europe, Middle East. You've seen a lot of different cultures, differences. And the biggest thing I find with UAE is the culture diversity. If you're coming from the UK, you're going to be surrounded by a majority of people that speak with British accents. While here, it's very, very different. Ireland's very, very similar. And that can be a big challenge for people coming into this market, is that what you're used to, it's going to be very different here. So quite keen just to get your take on the differences and diverse backgrounds and how that affects workplace dynamics?
I think I've said this to you before, where having worked in London for a long time, which I thought was very multicultural, then coming to Dubai was a bit of literally a culture shock at how multicultural.
But I think the difference in London is, though, everyone's working the London way. It is multicultural, but people are all sort of roughly in the same mindset of this how we do things.
Yeah.
Even though it is multicultural. And I worked in London myself for a few years, but I felt that everyone was on the same sort of view. You could be consistent with how you approach things. Well, obviously here,
yes,
everyone has their own view.
It is very different. But I think all the research is out there, and particularly if you work for a multinational organization and a publicly listed company, then sort of DEI is a big thing.
Yeah.
It's on at the top of the agenda for most listed organizations. Possibly less so in the US now with recent developments. But certainly, it's a big agenda point. And I think the clear thing is, again, going back to what we were saying earlier, different people think in different ways, and that can only be good in terms of the workplace environment, in terms of people's different experiences, different ways of thinking, can lead to different considerations,
different ways of connecting, different views, and even I see that with our team. We're a very small team in Alchemy, but we're all different nationalities. For me, if we do know after work beers, because no one wants to do it, that's fine. Probably just me and one or two other guys. Well, when I was in London, of course, everyone, especially in a recruitment company, everybody is you're the odd one out if you're not at the pub after work. Well, here, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So, and look, that's the way this place works is that especially you come out here for your first role, you need to understand that you're going to be surrounded with people from everywhere, from all backgrounds, all different ways. Ramadan, where you're going to have probably half your office sometimes fasting.
Yes.
You need to be conscious of, not drinking. Little things which again, if you come from where I'm from or whatever, that you're not used to these things. So these are the considerations you need to be aware of.
Three thoughts strike me. One is, what an amazing learning experience. Learning for that. I think I'm grateful for my sons going through school surrounded by different nationalities and cultures and backgrounds, and they're learning a lot from that more than they would say in a school in England, which is great. Second, I think the forming, as you say, of it creates a little subculture, especially in a smaller organization like yours, where it creates that subculture. But that awareness, it just reminds me of, I think when I first came over here, and Ramadan, obviously a thing with the fasting and sort of making sure if you're not fasting that you're
not sipping on your bottle of water in front of someone.
Exactly. But it just reminded me of one of my colleagues at Reuters in London, a devout Muslim. And I still to this day recollect that, during Ramadan, he'd be sitting there fasting, and there me sitting opposite at my desk, munching on a sandwich right in front of him. And I do often think about that.
Cultural awareness there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in the UK, I imagine, especially when Ramadan's during the summer, it just must be so tough when they're
difficult,
with the long days.
Yeah.
And then I just want to touch on then the evolving role of finance. So you're in an industry which is very fast moving, a lot of things changing. The word is, what is finance going to be in 5-10 years time? We're starting to see a little bit now. There's talk of some junior positions which may not be, that might be eaten up by AI. But if you were to look at a younger self, if you were a newly qualified accountant, given the experience you have, what would you be advising these people, up and coming guys, to be looking at? Where is finance going to be safeguarded?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, look, I've been on that journey, and I think I've been in organizations where the traditional finance role has evolved very quickly from that sort of reporting function to more of the business partnering.
Yes, it's went from the back office, I think, as opposed to in partnering with people.
And reading an article, the finance has been about the what, right? Now the question is, what now? So you've got that data. And like you say, AI can do all of that analytics and probably the reporting as well, and all of the basic stuff. And I think, finance now has to be taking that analysis and using it for
influence.
Helping with setting the strategy, and be forward looking. And I think your question specifically, I think it is quite challenging. I had my finance team offsite recently, and we were saying, traditionally, when your entry level roles, you learn all those basics by doing all of that so that you get a grounding. I don't have the answer, I've got to admit.
I don't think anyone does, but I think a lot of people think they have the answers.
Yeah, I fear for those traditional entry level roles where you're doing basic data analysis and all of that sort of thing, be it in audit or be it in corporate.
But I think again for the listeners, and this has gone on many conversations, which similar feedback is that I think the future is obviously the forward-looking side. It's using these tools to again influence other stakeholders in the business, but I really think it's going to be, if you have AI that can do a task that might have taken you 3 hours, that's now taken 10 minutes to do, you're still going to need to manage people. And I think in the day that we're in, especially with the younger generation, that all they want to do is work remotely, all they want to do is, for the most part, not have an office interaction. And that's where, in my opinion, the biggest gap is going to be for the up-and-coming talent, because you're going to have a shortage of guys who want to manage people, firstly. And that's going to be such an in-demand skill set, which no one's talking about, because it's going to be about managing your teams, getting them correctly, having the emotional intelligence. But then the other side of that is having the confidence to partner with people. And look, you've worked in, obviously London, where, it is all about being in the office, having that coffee, having that after-work beer, whatever you want to call it. But that's how the relationships are built.
Absolutely.
And now, the reality, especially in big companies where there is a remote working culture, is that if you don't have anybody defending you in the, I'm sure you've been in many of these big board meetings where there's a review on the employees in the business, and ultimately it comes down to who's going to protect that person in that meeting. And if the younger generation don't realize that you need to build these relationships if you want to go the distance.
No, it's very true. It actually just reminds me of Simon Sinek. I love his sort of his materials and stuff. But I remember one story he was saying about how there's a board meeting, and the young guy comes in, and as is the want these days, everyone comes in, they're on their phone looking at the meetings, and he's saying, it's up to more senior people to say, actually, let's all put the phones away. Let's have a conversation, discussion, and rather than just checking our emails while waiting for the meeting to go on, because that's the way they learn.
Yeah, our generation is we're new enough to this game, but their generation, which it's been the whole way up, their heads have been hunched over, looking at the phone. So I think it's a big thing. I think that's where I see the gap in 5-10 years, where if you don't have the confidence to business partner, because again, the reality is at your level, I think by your own admission now, you're probably not a tech guru with IFRSs and stuff like that, because you have someone on your team that can do it, you can review it, give comfort on it. But for the FMs, the FCs that want to get to FD, CFO, that's the gap. I think it's about building the relationships, having the confidence, and again, having the leadership to keep people in the team.
Yeah, it is. And I think it brings together two threads of what we've been talking about, the cultural thing. One of the things I'm sort of, not battling with, but sort of trying to challenge is I've got a team that are all from the Eastern Hemisphere, and we work in a company that's is a British corporation, and they are partnering or supporting business leaders who are from a Western background, and again, to your point about the finance business partner of the future, or even now, needs to be sort of more than just, here, I've done the data, look at it. AI can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
that's the thing, because your workload is going to be cut in half. So what are you doing for the rest of the day?
Yeah, cultural, those from the East sort of a little bit, maybe, I don't know if deferential is the right word, or not willing to challenge or push.
Yeah.
And I'm, changing that mindset amongst my team is probably one of the biggest things I'm battling with at the moment.
Good. And then, we've just touched on it there, but leadership, effective leadership, and, again, for aspiring leaders, what's your view on effective leadership, and how has your leadership maybe evolved, from now to 10 years ago? For, when you're coming up, was there any sort of areas which you thought, okay, I need to get a little bit better in this area? But just get your thoughts on that.
My own sort of style of leadership has been sort of created, if that's the right word, by good leaders that I've had, that I've looked to, and conversely, I've worked for a couple of, really bad ones.
There's no bad one to no good one. That's,
and things that I don't want to do, because I look at it and say, okay, how do I want to be treated, right? And like I say, the good leaders that I had, weren't micromanagers. They weren't barking commands and the likes. And conversely, the bad ones were basically. And I think that all of those have shaped my views. I don't think my style of leadership has changed too much over time. I'm lucky in that, coming from an audit background, that pretty much in your second or third year working, you're being responsible for a first year or a new entrant. So I've had sort of leadership experience from sort of almost day one sort of thing. And I'd like to think that I have kept that consistent in terms. I do like my leadership style is collaborative. It is seeking views from everyone. Yes, ultimately I do need to make a decision, and I need to stand by it. But I do want to get different views and thoughts, etc.
Wrapping up here, so for our listeners, if you could get, especially for job seekers who are looking to come into the UAE, that's, I said, you've been here nearly 20 years. What's your one piece of advice if, you had someone from the UK or wherever who wants to come to the UAE? What advice would you give them?
I think the most important one is probably needing to be here on the ground. If you're looking for a job.
I'm like
here.
A broken record.
Exactly.
Candidates,
within the finance world, I can't think of it, but unless you've got some rare sought after skill or experience, you can't. And you said it earlier, there is probably more supply than there is demand.
There's way more. If I could fill every job out there, if I could place every candidate, I'd be sat on a beach somewhere now. I wouldn't be here in the summer. But and then just getting to know you on a lighter note. If you weren't in this career, what do you think you'd be doing?
A rugby or football player, but I don't think my skill set would enable that. I think the realistic thing, I think I would have been a history professor.
Yeah.
That's my other passion. I love history.
Yeah. And then, so what's one book or movie that's had a big impact on you?
It's a book called The Great Indian Novel, and it's by an author called Shashi Tharoor.
Okay.
Who's from my part of India.
Yeah.
And he was at one point in his career UN Deputy Secretary General, something like that. But it was a book where he's sort of written, it's effectively the history of India, but in a sort of a storytelling format. But I thought it changed my life because it gave history from a different perspective. And you've heard that quote about history's written by the winners or
the oppressors.
The conquerors, right? And my sort of, having never lived in India and grown up outside and been in English schools all my life, my knowledge of India was sort of the sort of British Empire perspective.
Ireland, we have a similar thing in Ireland.
Right? Exactly. And this just, completely changed everything.
Perfect. Well, look, Gop, thank you so much for coming on. I think you've given a lot of golden nuggets there for our listeners, and hopefully we'll get you on again very soon.
Okay, great. No, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and see you on our next episode.